I hate the word greedy because people just want to maximize their profit unless you're being a crook. And in this particular case, the guy was not following the rules. Today's story is about a transaction I was involved in between a lender and a borrower. I was a broker between the two, and the lender tried to take advantage of the borrower at the last minute. And I had to step in to protect the borrower. Let me explain. When a borrower borrows money from a lender, usually there's a promissory note. A promissory note is the agreement between the two parties. How much is being borrowed, how long you have to pay it back, what interest rate, whether it's a balloon payment or amortization. It outlines the deal. And a promissory note is only as good as the borrower's name, their credit, their honor, their ability to repay. When you take that same promissory note and attach it to a piece of real estate, you do it through what's called a deed of trust or a mortgage. If you're in the West, it's a deed of trust. You attach it to a piece of real estate. And that note now secures this real property. So in this particular case, I had a borrower that had a piece of real estate and they wanted to borrow some money. I have a lender and I act as a broker between the two. I'm a private money lender in one of my businesses. So I enacted that transaction, or I originated that loan. There's three parties to a deed of trust, and I'm not one of them. It's the borrower, called the trustor, the lender, called the beneficiary, and it's a third party called the trustee. The trustee makes sure that if the borrower defaults, the trustee will step in and handle the foreclosure. That's called a trustee sale. Trustee sale. When you transfer property, you often do it through a grant deed or a warranty deed. But if you receive property through a foreclosure, it's called a trustee's deed. That's because the trustee had to step in and solve the problem. Okay, so these three parties. Well, there's another role of the trustee that I'm going to talk about today. Most often when the trustee has to step in, it's because the borrower has defaulted. Either they've quit making payments, or they're past their maturity date, or they've defaulted in some manner, and you start the foreclosure process. If that happens, the lender, the beneficiary, would reach out to the trustee and say, hey, we got a problem. I need you to step in as the third party to help me solve this problem. And they would initiate a foreclosure proceedings. And there's rules and laws that are enacted when a foreclosure sale is happening. Okay, but that's not what I'm talking about today. What I'm talking about today is the lender did not perform. The borrower performed as agreed according to the note, had made their payments, and now was making their last payment and wanted the document that says that they were free and clear of that particular lien. It was a first deed of trust. I should do a video on first and seconds and thirds. That'll come at another time. But the borrower had paid off their loan, and the lender was unwilling to sign what's called a reconveyance. It's a document that's recorded at the county recorder that says the borrower is paid off. The lender was unwilling to sign. So I talked to the lender. I go, hey, what are you doing? Why are you unwilling to sign the reconveyance? He's paid off. And the lender said, well, he was in default a couple of years ago. He had missed a few payments. Oh yeah, I remember that. But he caught up. Yes, he did. He paid a late fee and he caught up his payments. The lender said, yes, but I want to charge a default interest rate as punishment. So a default interest rate is, let's just say the interest rate on the note is 8% or 9%. And if you miss your payments and get into default, it can run up to 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15% interest. Default interest rates are designed to punish the borrower that has defaulted. Is it designed to punish or designed to incentivize? Maybe it's a stick and a carrot, because it incentivizes you to keep your payments current, because if you go default, you're going to be at a higher interest rate. Now, the only problem with this situation is it was not in the note. You have to Remember I said earlier, there's a promissory note. It outlines the deal, the agreement between the two parties, the borrower and the lender. How much is going to be borrowed, when it's going to be paid back, and what the interest rate is. There was no default interest called out in the note. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. In this particular case, there was no default interest. The lender could not retroactively say, well, I wanted to charge default interest, or I'm now going to go back and charge default interest. It doesn't work that way. They have to follow the agreement of the note. So when the lender refused to reconvey the note, I, who had originated the loan, was given, I got a telephone call from the borrower saying, hey, man, I paid my payments. I paid my last payment. I need my property free and clear. The lender was refusing. So what did I do? I called that same trustee and said to the trustee, you are the third party. You make sure the borrower and the lender do their duty according to the note. And in this case, which is pretty rare, the lender is not doing their duty. The borrower has met their obligations under the note. The lender is not meeting their obligations. I want you to reconvey this loan in your role as trustee. So the trustee, who doesn't see this very often, says, whoa, let me go do the research. So we gave him copies of the information from the collection company that had been collecting the notes all this time. And sure enough, they did the research. And they go, yeah, the guy's paid off. And the note does not call for default interest. We see he was late a couple of years ago, but he caught up the payments and he made his late payment fee. He's good. So they called the lender and said, Mr. Lender, we'd like you to reconvey this note. We're the trustee. We're investigating this. He says, I'm not doing it. So the trustee stepped in to protect the borrower and signed the reconveyance. And the lender was done. And that's how, in a deed of trust, those three parties, what their roles are and how the trustee protects the lender in most cases. But in this case, protected the borrower from I hate the word greedy, because people just want to maximize their profit unless you're being a crook. And in this particular case, the guy was not following the rules. And so I think he qualifies for being greedy. So in this case, the trustee was protecting the borrower from the greedy lender. That's the story today, how a trustee protects both the lender and the borrower.